There are moments, quiet, slow moments, when everything stops. No noise, no distraction, no pretending. And in that pause, something inside you whispers a brutal question: what's the point of all this? You look at your routine, your job, your relationships, even your goals, and they suddenly feel empty. Like you're just moving through life with a mask on, doing what you're supposed to, chasing dreams you didn't even choose. You scroll your phone, see other people smiling, thriving, achieving, and still that ache remains. It's not depression exactly. It's not sadness. It's something deeper. A kind of spiritual exhaustion. Like your soul is tired of playing the same game over and over, without knowing why. If you've ever felt that, you're not alone. And more importantly, you're not broken. You're human. And what you're feeling is not a crisis, it's an invitation. A powerful, painful signal that it's time to question everything. Because meaning isn't something you find on the surface of life. You don't stumble into it on a perfect day. You carve it out of discomfort. You build it brick by brick when everything feels pointless. Most people think meaning is something you discover, like a lost treasure. But the truth is, meaning is something you create. And often it begins in darkness, in doubt, in silence. Friedrich Nietzsche, the German philosopher, once said, "He who has a why to live can bear almost any how." That quote has carried people through war, prison, heartbreak, and deep personal hell. But how do you find that why when nothing feels real? When you're tired of pretending to care? The answer is you look inward. Not in the self-help, light a candle and journal way, but in the raw, brutal way that forces you to admit, maybe you've been living someone else's story. Maybe the reason everything feels meaningless is because what you're pursuing was never really yours. You were trained to chase certain milestones, success, money, beauty, approval. And even when you get close, it feels hollow. That's not failure. That's awakening. When the system fails to give you meaning, the system wants you to numb out. To scroll, to buy, to distract yourself with quick fixes. But if you can resist that, even for a little while, you'll start to hear something else. A quieter voice. One that doesn't want you to be impressive. One that wants you to be real. That's your core. That's the part of you that's never been marketed to, never been conditioned. That voice is where real meaning starts. Not in fame, not in goals, not even in happiness, but in connection. Connection to yourself. To your pain. To your curiosity. To the things that matter even when they don't make you money. The world will never teach you how to find meaning, because a meaningful life is a dangerous thing. A person who finds meaning becomes less controllable, less afraid. They don't obey as easily. They don't panic in chaos. They start thinking for themselves. And society isn't built to support that. So if you feel disconnected, if your life feels pointless, good. Not because it's easy, but because it means the illusion is breaking. You've outgrown the lie. And now you're standing in front of the real work. Not how to be successful, but how to be whole. How to feel alive again. That won't happen in a day. But it starts with tiny shifts. Asking different questions. Letting go of false expectations. Allowing yourself to feel lost, without rushing to fix it. Meaning shows up when you stop performing and start noticing. Noticing what energizes you. What you return to when no one's watching. What you would do even if nobody gave you credit. Meaning isn't a finish line. It's a direction. And every time you make a choice that's aligned with your truth, no matter how small, you move closer to it. Most people don't even realize they're stuck in a meaning crisis because they're too busy being productive. Their calendar is full. Their notifications never stop. But deep down they feel hollow. Like they're building a life on sand. You wake up, you work, you eat, you scroll, you sleep. Repeat. The same patterns. The same thoughts. The same subtle ache in your chest that whispers, "Is this all there is?" And if you ever try to talk about it, people tell you, "Just be grateful." Or, "It could be worse." But you're not ungrateful. You're just awake. Awake enough to realize that comfort is not the same as meaning. That surviving is not the same as living. And that you were not born just to pay bills and die. That's where your real journey begins, when you finally admit that the life you were handed is not enough. And you're willing to tear it apart to build something honest. The problem is, we live in a culture that rewards distraction. It celebrates hustle. It praises the external, the title, the house, the car, but it ignores the internal. It doesn't teach you how to sit with yourself. How to be alone without feeling lonely. How to breathe through uncertainty. How to ask the deeper questions like, who am I without all of this? And that's terrifying because we've built our entire identities on things outside of us. Careers, relationships, social status. But those things are not you. They're costumes. They're roles. And when they fall away, you're left with what's real. Viktor Frankl, who survived the Holocaust and wrote the book Man's Search for Meaning, said that meaning is not found in comfort, but in responsibility. He believed that we don't invent meaning, we accept it. We take responsibility for something bigger than ourselves. For someone. For an idea. For a cause. And in that sacrifice we find purpose. You're not going to find meaning just sitting around waiting for it to feel right. You find it by choosing something that matters and showing up for it even when it's hard. Especially when it's hard. That might mean building something, helping someone, committing to a craft even when no one's watching. It doesn't have to be dramatic or huge. You don't need to save the world. You just need to live in a way that honors something real. For some people, that's art. For others, it's being present for their child. For some, it's healing, growing, teaching, creating. What matters is that it pulls you out of yourself, that it gives your pain a place to go, that it transforms your suffering into service, not in a performative way but in a deeply personal one. Because when your pain becomes part of someone else's healing, that's where meaning lives. But let's be honest, this isn't easy. It takes time. It takes brutal honesty. It takes sitting in the silence long enough to stop pretending. It takes the courage to walk away from things that once made you feel safe, but now feel fake. It takes losing parts of yourself to find what matters. But that loss? That uncertainty? That's not failure. That's the doorway. Every person who has ever lived a meaningful life has walked through that same door, the one marked, "I don't know who I am anymore." And on the other side of that door, something sacred, something alive, something that no amount of success, applause, or validation can replace. Somewhere along the way we were taught that meaning has to be big, that it needs to be tied to legacy, fame, or world-changing impact. But that's a lie. Meaning isn't loud. It doesn't need a spotlight. It lives in the quiet places, where you choose to be present even when no one's watching. Where you sit with someone who's hurting and just listen. Where you do the right thing even when it costs you. Where you stay curious even when you're tired. Where you keep showing up not because it's glamorous but because it's true. The mistake we make is waiting to feel meaningful before we start living with meaning. But the truth is, the feeling comes after the action. It's built over time. Every time you choose growth instead of numbness. Every time you take a deep breath and do the hard thing. Every time you tell the truth. Every time you walk away from what's comfortable and into what's real, even if it's raw. That's how meaning is born. Not all at once. Not in a flash of clarity. But slowly, quietly. Like roots growing underground. Invisible to the world but anchoring you, keeping you steady while everything else feels like it's falling apart. And still, there will be days when it all feels pointless again. That's human. That's normal. But now you know, that feeling isn't the end. It's a reminder. A prompt. A sacred message saying, look deeper. Because the point isn't to feel perfect. The point is to feel connected. To yourself. To others. To something bigger than the noise. And that connection? That's your compass. That's what keeps you grounded when nothing else makes sense. We are meaning-making creatures. We survive heartbreak, loss, failure. Not because we avoid pain but because we find a reason inside of it. We take the broken pieces and build something that matters. A lesson. A story. A quiet kind of strength. And when we do, we stop asking what's the point, and start asking what can I do with this? That shift, from despair to creation, is where the power lives. So if you're lost, if you're tired, if you feel like nothing matters, don't run. Don't distract. Don't numb it away. Sit with it. Listen to it. Let it strip away what's false. And then choose something, however small, that feels honest. Water it. Commit to it. And watch it grow. Meaning isn't out there waiting to be found. It's something you're capable of creating every single day, even on the days it all feels pointless. Because maybe the point isn't to escape the darkness. Maybe the point is to light something inside it.